Hello and welcome to Stern Effects. I'm Eran Stern, and in this tutorial I'll show you how to use 3D transparency to achieve this look in After Effects. So this is another part of an ongoing series about 3D in After Effects where I'm covering all sorts of techniques to make your life easier and quicker when working with 3D layers in the program. Now there's a playlist of all the tutorials, so if you like to see the entire thing, you can do it, but each one was created as a standalone movie. So as usual, I'll show you all the steps required to create the short teaser you just saw. Now, besides creating a fancy 3D title, you'll also learn how to work with colorful SVG fonts, animate the camera, modify materials, add a unique glow effect, and if you'll stick until the end, I'll show you a free script that will help you to create slimmer and dependable projects and be more efficient in After Effects. Sounds like a good deal to me, so let's stop drilling and get on with it. Okay, so I'm going to start here inside After Effects with a composition I already created ahead of time. There is a hidden shape layer here, as well as a few shade layers. I'm going to return to them in a moment, but first I want to show you how to use SVG fonts, also known as Scalable Vector Graphics fonts, inside After Effects. Now, as things stand now, when I'm recording this tutorial, After Effects does not support it directly. So we'll need to use Adobe Illustrator to help us bring all those shapes into After Effects and then animate them. All right, so I'll double click on the horizontal type tool to create a text in the middle of the screen, and I'll type in the word xenon in lowercase. Now, this is important because the font that I'm going to use, if I'll click on the character panel and I'm going to highlight it, is this one, the Popsky Color. I'll put a link in the description if you want to try it. This is a commercial font. Now, the reason that I chose to type in lower cases is because the lower cases version of this font has these nice lines that I want to animate. Now, as you can see, After Effects doesn't support all the colors that this font has to offer. So to get those colors, I'm going to double click on the little T here in the timeline. This is going to select everything that I just typed, in this case, just the word xenon. I'll copy it to the clipboard and I'm going to say goodbye to it over here. And then I'll switch to Illustrator, which on my machine is running in the background. I'll create a new document, Command N here on the Mac, Control N on the Windows side. I'll grab this preset, the web preset, so 1920 by 1080, and click Create. And then I'll select the type tool, click somewhere over here, and paste what I've copied from After Effects. And now we can see all the colors because both Illustrator as well as Photoshop supports them. But because we are here in Illustrator, we can use those vectors, and this is what we want to bring to After Effects. So the first thing I'll do is make sure that this is centered on the middle of the page, and then I'll right-click on it and choose Create Outlines. Now I want to change the black color because I want to extrude those shapes in After Effects, and black doesn't really play nice with 3D materials. So what I'll do is switch to the Direct Selection tool, make sure nothing is selected, and click on one of the black shapes. Next, I'll go to the Select menu, and under Same, I'll choose Fill Color. And Illustrator is going to select all the shapes that have a similar color. And now I can double click on the Fill Color and type in my own value. So I came up with this value, 220 for the hue, 90 for the saturation, and 90 for the brightness. And this way I'm changing all of them at the same time. Now I'll press Command or Control S to save the artwork. I'll place it on the desktop in my case. I'll name it Xenon, then click Enter to save, and then OK to accept the default settings. Then I'll bring back After Effects to the front, double click in the gray portion to invoke the Import dialog, navigate to where I just saved this file, then click Open to bring this file. I don't care about the composition. I actually want just the footage in this case, and the layer doesn't really matter. I'm just going to say OK and just drag this layer over here so we can see it in its full glory. And now, to get access to all the different paths inside After Effects, as well as to be able to extrude this shape, I'll need to convert it from an artwork to a shape layer by right-clicking on it and then choose Create Shapes from Vector Layer. And then After Effects is going to switch off the visibility of the original layer, which now becomes redundant. You can safely select and delete it, as well as delete it from the project panel if you don't need it. And you have access to all the individual paths inside the contents of this shape layer. Okay, so to save some time, I'm going to say goodbye to everything I did so far and show you that this shape layer, I'm first going to name it the same way, Xenon, and turn on the visibility for it, is exactly the same thing as we just saw. The main difference here, if I'll tap on the U key to show the keyframes, is that I animated those lines. And those lines are just going to help us to bring some motion to this shape. So they are animated across the composition almost until the end. Very easy stuff to do inside After Effects. You already know how to do it. Just grab the desired group and then animate it on the X and Y axis. All right, I'll press U again to hide those keyframes, and then I'll open the layer so we can see what we have here. Now we want to convert it to a 3D layer. So I'll check the 3D box here, and we want access to the extrusion. For that, we need to change the renderer. We can do it from this button, or we can just switch it from the classic 3D to the Cinema 4D renderer, which is going to enable us to access the geometry options. I'll start by changing the bevel style to angular, and then I'll change the bevel depth to 4, as well as give this text a lot of extrusion. Actually, the maximum value I can type in, which is 1000 units. Then I'll open up the material options. I'll make sure that cast shadows is switched on because I want those shapes to cast shadows on each other and also on other ingredients that I will show in a moment. But most importantly, I'll also turn on the reflection intensity. Let's start with a value of 50%, and of course you can take it as high or as low as you want. And now I want to affect the transparency because after all, this is the name of the tutorial. But as you can see, there isn't a transparency option. The only thing that I can do if I'll close all the other stuff and open up the transform is change the opacity. Now, before I move on, I want to explain the difference between opacity and transparency. Now, if you're coming from a 2D design background, there isn't a big difference. Basically, it's the ability to see through a layer to other stuff underneath. But in 3D, they are not the same. Transparency is the quality of being able to see through some material substance or partially see through it. And this is being affected by the amount of light bouncing between the different surfaces, as well as the materials themselves. Now, currently in the Cinema 4D renderer inside After Effects, there isn't a way to control transparency. As we saw, only opacity is available. But since we are working with so much of a basic material, the effect that we're going to get will look almost identical. And this is why I've named this tutorial 3D Transparency. Okay, so after this scientific disclaimer, we can return to our timeline and see how the opacity value is affecting the characters. I'm going to reduce the opacity first to 50% and let After Effects think about it. And as you can see, we are getting semi-transparent materials or look. I'll animate it by creating a keyframe over here. And then let's go to 4 seconds and I'll set it to 80%. Again, those numbers are coming from trial and error. I've played with it and decided that this is going to look good. Now, you may or may not agree because it looks very flat right now. So in order to actually enjoy all the 3D transparency or opacity, depending how you want to call it, I'm going to show you that I've planned ahead of time and I have extra layers here. Specifically, I have lights. So I'll switch on the lights and already we can see how this is going to affect our shapes. I also have a floor layer over here, so I might as well turn it on. This is just a shape layer in case you are curious, with a gray background, actually a gradient, but the gradient is going to be dismissed when we are going to convert it to a 3D layer. I also want to show you that this layer, under its material options, is set to a 50% reflection intensity and 100% for its reflection roll-off. So if I set it to 0, this is how it looks by default. I just raise it to 100%. I haven't touched the reflection sharpness. So if you want, you can play with it. It's going to slow down the render, but it may give you a unique and interesting look. For now, I'm just going to close this layer. I'll also turn on the visibility of the wall layer that I've placed behind those letters, just to show you how everything is working together. Now, there's also another layer of text here. I can switch it on, but we won't see it. It's over here to the right. And in order to see it, we need to actually work on the camera animation, which is going to be the next step. So I'll make sure nothing is selected here in my timeline. I'll go to the layer menu, and under new, I'll create a new camera. I'll choose the 50mm preset and say OK. Now, to be able to control the camera quickly and also see what's happening, I'll switch to the draft 3D mode, which is going to downsample our scene. It's going to take away all the reflections and the shadows. We can still see those semi-transparent planes here, but this is going to work in real time, meaning that we can concentrate on the animation stage. Now, there are a couple of ways to animate a camera in After Effects. First, you have 3 buttons over here that you can switch between them by pressing the digit 1, 2, and 3. You can also use the old school keyboard shortcut of C. C is going to toggle between the 3 tools, the orbit, the pan, and the dolly tool. Or my favorite way of working, and I'll switch back to the selection tool, is to temporarily just switch between them using the Option key and my 3 mouse buttons. So to demonstrate how this works, I'll hold down the Option Alt on Windows, and you can see that my camera by default is going to change to the Orbit tool. Now, I'm going to hover on top of the area that I want to work on, and if I'm going to use my left mouse button, I will be able to orbit around it. So this is more or less the place that I want to start. And notice this little plus. This is going to tell me where I'm going to orbit around the axis or where I'm going to dolly through. So to illustrate it even better, I'm going to still hold the Option or Alt, but now hold the right mouse button, and my cursor is changing to the dolly or track tool. And this means that I can just go into the area that I want to track into or dolly into. And this is what I will do. So I want to see inside those semi-transparent shapes. So this is probably going to be my starting point. And if I want, I can also change the panning. Again, I'm holding the Option or Alt. This time, I'll click and hold on the middle mouse key just to get maybe a better starting point. So something like this. I want to look inside this tube. This is going to be my first place. Now I want to see what I'm modifying here in the timeline to add keyframes. So I'll select the camera, go to the animation menu, and select Reveal All Modified Properties. Or you can also double tap the letter U. So U in sequence will show you all the things that you've modified. So After Effects is telling me that I've modified the aperture. This is completely wrong. I'll ignore it. I'm going to close it. But I will create keyframes for the point of interest as well as the position at the beginning of the timeline. Now I'll grab the current time indicator. I'll move it to 5 seconds. And I'm going to hold down again the Option here on the Mac, Alt on Windows. And using my right mouse button, I'll track away, I'll dolly out of the scene until I can see the entire title, including, by the way, the second title that I created over here. I'm going to hold down again Option or Alt. I know I sound like a broken record, but this is important for this method to work. And then I'll click on the middle mouse button to get quickly to the pan tool. And while still holding the Option or Alt, I'll click on the left mouse button to find a nicer angle by orbiting the camera like so. Now we can marquee around all of the keyframes, press F9, go to the beginning, and press spacebar to preview the animation. Because we are using the draft 3D method, After Effects is going to preview it in real time. Now, if you want, you can add a secondary motion, so the camera is not going to just stop at the 5 seconds mark. And to do so, I'll make sure I'm at the end of the timeline, although this is not a mandatory step, but I want to create a keyframe at the end. So I'll make sure I'm at the end, select the camera, right-click on it, and then from the camera options, I'll create an orbit null, which is an invisible object. The camera is already parented to it. This is an automatic thing inside After Effects, meaning that I have additional control on the camera. If I'll press P, I can move the camera with its keyframes independently. So I can maybe zoom out a little bit more, maybe even find a better angle. We can raise it up or down depending on our needs. I'm just going to create a keyframe at the end, then go to the beginning and maybe also zoom in even further using the camera null, just to make sure that we are starting really inside this very interesting tunnel. I want as bigger movement as possible at the beginning. So I'm going to really use this null to push the camera all the way inside the letters. This is what I love, to just travel inside the letters. And if you want a preciser control, hold down Command here on the Mac control on Windows, which will allow you to move this null that controls the camera much more delicately, so 10 times slower. So something like this looks interesting. Let's check how this works by disabling the Draft 3D button. This will take a moment for After Effects to render due to all the transparency and reflections that it needs to work on, so be patient with it. But I think this is very promising. All right, let's check the final resting point at 5 seconds. Looks good. And I'll bring back the Draft 3D so I can preview the new animation with the camera orbit null. And you know what? I'll pause it in the middle, click on the word position, as well as press F9 to add some easing to these keyframes. And then I'll preview it again. And of course, you can use the graph editor to control the easing even further. But I think we've managed to create a very interesting animation with minimal effort. All right, so now I'll close everything and let's add some glow to mimic the xenon gas beautiful blue glow natural effect. So for that, I'll go to the end and I'll switch off the Draft 3D so we can take a look at the final render. To improve this render, I'll make sure nothing is selected. Then go to the layer menu and under new, I'll create an adjustment layer. I'll rename this adjustment layer glow, then go under effect, stylize, and add the glow effect. So this is going to be our main glow. I'll set the threshold to 10%, the radius to 100, and the intensity to 0.8. And this is going to produce this look. Just a little bit over the top, but we are going to change it by setting the glow colors instead of original to A and B colors. And then for both color A and B, I'm going to choose the same blue color that we've used in the beginning. So 220 for the hue and both 90% for the saturation and brightness. And then we can sample color B from color A, wait a few moments for After Effects to catch up with us, and take a look at this very glowing look. Now, to emphasize the edges, I'll use a secondary glow layer. I'll duplicate this one by pressing Command or Control D, and then I'll reset the effect. I'll change the threshold to 100. I'll set the radius to 50, and finally I'll set the intensity to 0.5. Now, again, I'll let After Effects catch up with me, and I can now adjust it to taste. So if I want to lower this one, for example, I can return to the main glow, maybe lower its intensity to 0.5, or even lower the opacity of the entire layer. So play with it until you're happy. And basically this is it. Now I promised you that if you'll stick until the end, I'll show you a cool free tool, and here we are. So before I'll demonstrate the Void script by Battlex, I must tell you that I'm not affiliated with them in any way, shape or form. I'm just a happy customer that uses their amazing tools on a daily basis. Now there's a link in the description if you want to check it out yourself. It's completely free, but you can donate if you feel that it is useful for you. Also make sure to use, or actually to see the full tutorial by the amazing Jake Bartlett to learn all about the tool and all the things that it can do for you. Actually, it is a script. So let me show you what it can do for us in this project. I'm going to return to this timeline, and then under the window menu, I'll just launch Void. And this is just going to help me simplify. If I'll go back to the project panel, you can see that now I have a solid folder, or actually to be more accurate, a solids folder, because not only I have adjustment layers, but all the nulls and the new solids are going to be placed over here. And these are dependable layers, meaning that if for some reason I'm going to delete this adjustment layer, it's going to affect this project. Also, it may be a little bit difficult for you to keep track on all of these things. So this is one of the purposes of the script. I'm going to run it and ask it to replace all the nulls and the adjustment layers as well as the solids in this project. By clicking on the word project over here, you can see that it found one null layer, which is being replaced in this project with a void layer. And this is our camera orbit null. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the adjustment layers. And it found two adjustment layers, as we all know, which are using the glow effect. And it replaced it with a shape layer. In this case, the name is variant, that acts exactly like the adjustment. And we can do the same thing for solids. So I'm going to click, and in this case, because I haven't used any solids, it's not going to do anything. If I'll go back to the project panel, we can see that we have now an empty solids folder that I can safely trash. And now I have a much more controllable and easy to manage project without the need of these dependencies. So I think this is a great addition to After Effects. I know that I'm going to use it from now onwards. And of course, if you want to test it yourself, there is a link in the description. And now we are ready to render this. After Effects already started to cache this in the background, but I'm going to bring my time ruler to the beginning, maximize the frame, and start the render process. Now, I must warn you that this will take some time to render. Since we are dealing with long extruded text, semi-opaque layers, reflection and shadows, After Effects will need to work few seconds on each frame, so you'll need to be patient with it. If you are in a rush, you can try to lower the comp resolution to half or quarter and run a first render pass and check how this looks. If you are satisfied, then render the full composition in full resolution. For what it's worth, on my machine, this took 25 minutes to complete, and I think the results justify the waiting time. In any case, this is it for this tutorial. Thank you so much for sticking until the end. I hope you find the information useful, and if so, you know what to do. Please leave a comment if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to assist. Until next time, stay creative and always be transparent.